information, and when you look at Mwongozo, there's clarity around where you need to disclose, by when you need to disclose, and how you need to disclose. Some of that information needs to be disclosed. Let me hear. From where? Where do you disclose some of that information? Some of the information up there on the screen. Where do you disclose it? Where will you disclose it? Anybody? Where do you disclose some of that information? Where?
For example, your vision and values, where would you expect to see them in the organization?
Where?
Engineer says the website.
The website. Thank you very much, engineer. What does that mean? That you have a fully functioning what? Website, right? So the first question as board members we need to ask ourselves is, what does our website say about us as a state corporation? When you look at Mwongozo and we do governance auditing, are we disclosing all that we need to disclose? When we go to the annual report, are we disclosing all that we need to disclose? Are we putting out, for example, statements about employee rights on our walls within the state corporation? Because that is required under the Employment Act. So the second principle, Nkirote, is transparency and disclosure. Now, what do you say about the third principle?
So, Catherine, at the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, as we say, you are required to ensure that all those stakeholders you are talking about, those who are impacted by your mandate, actually observe the accountability and the seriousness that you give in providing oversight and managing the institution. It must be observable. One person I had said, wisdom that cannot be seen is a mirage. You may think you're very wise, you may think you're very accountable, but if it is not observable, then it is likely a mirage. So financial reports and other kinds of reports will need to go out to all stakeholders. But how do you report what you have not done? So one of the key roles and responsibilities of directors in the state corporation is to ensure that the internal control system is working well. What does that mean? Ensuring first and foremost that every line of assurance that is available to you as the board is functioning as it ought to. For example, the first line of assurance is actually the management itself, the staff, who are daily carrying out the operation, daily executing on the mandate, the vision, and the values of the organization. It is critical that they understand what risks are faced, both from a strategic and operational perspective, that they are actually documenting these risks, and that they are documenting and implementing clear mitigation or management strategies over those risks. So, what you will see at the board level, should be a view of the top risks in the form of a risk register. I don't know how many of you have seen the risk register of your organization as part of your induction or as part of your quarterly board papers. Okay, maybe it's not a rhetorical question. Anyone seen their risk register? Excellent. For those who haven't yet seen it, you're sitting next to someone. We say it's about networking. You're sitting next to someone who has seen a risk register. Could you ask them what it looks like so that you can go back and ask for it? So that management itself is identifying and managing the risks. But then they have experts, the second line of assurance. They have risk managers who enable best practice in terms of the management, categorization of those risks, and are able then to come to the board through the relevant committee, and we'll talk about those committees, to actually give assurance to the board that the practices in terms of risk management are being implemented, and if not, where there is a risk that may actually impact the ability of the organization to exist or to be sustainable. So, for example, I remember during the COVID-19 pandemic, do you remember that month or the week when the lockdown was announced? I was sitting on a state operation board, and we were called for a special meeting because one of the risks had crystallized, and therefore it was incumbent that the management discusses with the board the business continuity plan and the crisis management plan that would enable the organization, in this case it was CASNET, to go ahead and still have exams being taken and results being released. So that was part of the risk management framework for which the risk managers supported us with. Then there is the third level of assurance, and that is through the audit process. So you will have your internal auditors. There have always been debates about this internal auditor person. Yep. Who do they report to? And who should be interacting with them? And how do we interact with them?
Absolutely. So, the internal auditor reports to the board. They report to you, the board. They don't report to management. They report to management only for administrative reasons. And I think one of the guidance that SCAD has given, and it is also in Mwongozo, that they should be at a level that is comfortable engaging with you. So they should not be so low in the line that they cannot give advisory to the board.
Absolutely. And the internal auditor, incidentally, is the secretary to the audit committee of the board. Audit and risk committee of the board, because they should be able to discuss independently and objectively issues that relate even to the company secretariat or even to the executive office. And then once the internal auditor has supported you to ensure that you are actually improving your system and controls, it is a preparation for the external audit that is done by the National Audit Office, which you will also interact with by engaging with the officers to really understand what it is that they have observed in your institution and whether the attitude towards risk management and accountability is right, because attitude is everything.
Because I think one other thing that perhaps we need to point out is that there are two reports which every board should be getting on a quarterly basis. If you look at your chapter 3 of Mwongozo, every board should be receiving written assurance from the internal auditor that the system of internal controls is working effectively, that risk management is effective. So I don't know how many have seen those written assurances from your internal auditor. Has anybody seen it? Written assurance that internal controls are working, that risk management is working. If we haven't, please let's go back and ask.
Remember, Catherine, that this is different from the internal audit reports.
Absolutely.
Catherine, I just wanted to mention before I bring you on to discuss the next issue on ethical leadership, that you know the day of ICT projects that were labeled as white elephants has come to pass.
Yeah.
I know that many of us are putting in place enterprise-wide programs, ERPs. And sometimes it takes so long to bring it into place to implement it. But I know we have the ICT authority, ICTA, that has been of good assistance to many state corporations in checking whether the implementation of their ICT systems is as it should be, and ensuring that the relationship, even from a service level with the providers, is intact. So, collaborate. Collaboration is key in the management of ICT risks, which don't only include the systems incidentally, but also these days, cyber security risk factoring, as well as data protection risks.
Absolutely. And remember we talked about efficiency and effectiveness. Mwongozo goes on in this chapter to say that every organization should integrate ICT in its operations for efficiency and effectiveness. And it starts with simple things like e-board. Are we on e-board? How many of us are on e-board? E-board. If you're not, please go back and ask why you're not on e-board. And you saw that His Excellency the President was leading with a paperless cabinet meeting. That's e-board. So please ask for e-board. Ethical leadership, Nkirote, is the next principle under Mwongozo in chapter 4. And it says the operations of the organization should be guided by ethical practices that seek to promote good corporate citizenship. The story of the fish rotting from the head. And so the board has a critical role in promoting ethics and integrity in the organization. It starts with us as board members ensuring that we have a code of conduct. Now, many organizations do have a code of conduct. But when we do governance auditing, what do we find out?
That the code of conduct is for them.
The staff.
Not us.
Not us.
Yes, them.
Yeah.
Whoever those them are, and most likely the staff,
Yeah.
and not us as directors.
Absolutely. So when we just read your code of conduct and we see employees, we see staff, we don't see the board. It means you don't even believe in what you're asking your staff to do. So if you have such a code of conduct, please go back and amend it. The board has a responsibility to ensure that you're promoting corporate reputation and image, that you are actually proud of the organization on whose board you sit, that you have a conflict of interest policy, that you have a whistleblowing policy, and that those are being implemented effectively. You only have very few minutes, so chapter 5, the next principle.
So thank you, Catherine. Just picking up one last thing on the ethical leadership. Remembering that within your organization, you are required to have an integrity officer. And this integrity officer should have their reports coming to the board from time to time as to what is happening in terms of integrity principles within your organization, and remembering that you have a whole, the world is your oyster. You have a whole framework, a value-based constitution, as well as the Leadership and Integrity Act, which supports you in your work. Catherine, here I have a question for you. I don't think we'll go too much into this, but my question is this. Do you see that last point down there? Minority shareholders.
Right.
We said we, the people,
We the people.
are the shareholders.
Absolutely.
So who are these minorities and what do they have to do with state corporations?
A great question indeed. You know, some of the state corporations are actually companies under the Companies Act. So state corporations such as Kenya Power, because the government only owns up to about 51%, 50 plus 1 shares, which means that you have, or the state corporation has minorities. Now the role of the board under this section, Nkirote, is that the board should protect the rights of the minority shareholders, who are not governments, who are not we the people, but individuals like you and me who have invested in that organization.
And Catherine, a question was asked in one of the earlier sessions. If those minority shareholders do not have a representative on the board, do we really need to bother with them? And actually, we recognize that, as Catherine has said, integrating ICT or technology into your organization is not just a theoretical principle, it is actually practical, because you can use technology then to involve the minority shareholders in the decisions that are being taken by sharing with them memoranda and allowing them to provide feedback which can be well considered not only by the general meeting of the members but also by the board. So it is critical that we keep them in mind as we do all our other stakeholders.
Absolutely. So Chapter 6, Nkirote, is that the board should proactively manage relationships with stakeholders. You will remember when Tyler went to Ghana, for a very long time, Nkirote, they could not work. Why was that?
So, one of the key principles around stakeholder relationships is you cannot manage and have a plan to communicate effectively and keep aligned stakeholders who you have not identified. So, Catherine, I believe in the tallow oil matter, there was a community issue that had not been identified and a clear plan put in place to manage it. I'm not sure how many of us here have actually gone through a stakeholder mapping and review exercise that is not linked to strategic planning. Not linked to strategic planning. How many regularly review their organization's stakeholder map? Wow. This is it. The situation, you know, the other day I heard that we are moving away from what was called the VUCA world to a bunny world. A bunny world being where our stakeholders and the environment within it is much more brittle, much more anxious, much more nonlinear, and often incomprehensible, which means that as a board it is critical that on a regular basis, not only during the preparation of the strategic plan or what we used to call the mid-term review, that we are reviewing our stakeholder mapping, that we are clear who our stakeholders are, the old and the new that are coming into our environment, that we are identifying which stakeholders are transformational in nature. Transformational being that they actually have a say or would have an impact on the sustainability or existence of our state corporation in the next week, month, in the next year. Who, perhaps we can hear an example of one transformational stakeholder that you can think of that would have an impact on the existence of your state corporation. One? Someone can shout it out.
Anyone?
A customer, a client,
Absolutely.
an appointing authority, your parent ministry.
Yeah.
transformational stakeholders need a clear plan as to how to continue engaging, how to continue communicating with them what is going on in your organization, and how you continue aligning to the principles and the policies and their expectations.
Now, Nkirote, as we finish off this slide on stakeholder engagement, there is one very important stakeholder on this stage right now. How many of us proactively engage her office? You know what I'm talking about? You know, sit and you know that one is?
This one, here,
That one.
leakage.
You know, you should be proactively engaging that office so that you develop that relationship with them. Don't wait until you're being inspected, there are issues, so on and so forth. But do reach out and find out, where are you going? What is your strategic vision for these organizations and how can we effectively govern them? Chapter 7 Nkirote is on sustainability and performance management. And the board, and we're running quickly because of time, the board has a role to ensure that each organization has developed sustainability goals. And when we talk about sustainability goals, the in-language now is ESG. Do we have ESG goals for our organization? Are they on our website? What are they and how are we tracking them to ensure that there is sustainability? Do we have an effective performance management system in place? As part of your HR documents which have been approved by SCAC, do we have those? So these are questions that you need to go back and perhaps respond to. Nkirote?
Yes. In terms of compliance with the laws and regulations, we always make a joke. We will not walk alone. I know there is a football club. We shall not talk about the football club that does not walk alone, but we will not walk alone in this role that you have been given. You have a full framework of the Constitution we mentioned, which is value-based. You have your laws and regulations, not only your enabling legislation, but every other legislation that impacts what you are doing as an institution. You have national and international standards. Examples of international standards, I wish we had time, would be, for example, the ISO standards, if you are ISO certified. There could be industry level standards. There could be world, for example, health or labor standards which you need to adhere to. There are also internal policies which you have approved as a board and are tracking implementation on. So one of the ways in which that you need to ensure that you are complying with all these laws and regulations and standards is by having a clear compliance plan, which includes a new trend, not a new trend actually, a trend in corporate governance which is audit all things. So many audits can support you in ensuring that you are able to comply with the laws and regulations. Principally, the legal and compliance audits, which must be carried out annually within your organization and with an independent auditor reviewing, an independent legal auditor reviewing this every 2 years.
So just to mention very, very quickly, other departments under Mwongozo, we ran out of time, but the importance of induction, that's why this process is so important. But Mwongozo goes on to say that on an annual basis, every board member must undergo at least 2 days of training. So please, as board members, let's make sure that we identify our development needs, that we cost them and ensure that they are part of our budget and that we actually undergo that annual development plan. Succession planning is a key role for the board. Please make sure that you have a succession plan both for yourselves and also for senior management within the organization and all other critical roles within the organization. I know Simon will talk about the almanac, so I'm not going to that. Board tools, very, very important, including the board charter, but also the board diversity matrix. And the board diversity matrix, that is the chair's way of engaging the appointing authority in the event that there are skill gaps within the board. We know that we don't appoint board members, but you can use that to really influence with what type of skill should come into your board. And then of course, Mwongozo says we need to move towards integrated reporting, and of course it provides for term limits. Why is this, all of this important? Nkirote, if you could just wrap it up for us.
What we know for a fact is this, that we, as directors, I don't know whether you can see that picture, have been assigned a solemn responsibility. Can you see that young lady, very serious with her job? I think that is us as directors. Huh? But who is she doing it for, and what is that person doing? Who, the lady who is being fixed, what is she doing? Watching very keenly what is going on. So don't think that you're doing this behind a fence, under a wall, you are being watched keenly by we, the people, as you do your job. So it's not about the money. No one can compensate a board member, whether in the public or the private sector, adequately for the job you are doing. It is a service to this nation. It's actually not about your organization. That we can say for a fact, because today you're a director there, tomorrow you are not. It's not about your organization. And it is certainly not about you. Yes, you have been identified, and we respect that you have the competence and the skill to do it. But it's really not about you. Catherine, what we know for a fact, it's about prosperity. It's about families, it's about communities, it's about this country of Kenya, and it is about the impact that we are making on the community and the change that we want to see. And us committing to bring the change that we want to see for this nation. So we encourage you in your role, but remember, we have a mirror, and we, the people, are watching. Thank you.